come in, mind the velvet rope, it's mostly decorative, like everything else in this building. My name doesn't matter, my job does. I am your descent, which is a Latin way of saying the person who stands between you and the placards so the placards don't have to do all the work. I have been walking these galleries for longer than I care to date with any precision, which you'll find is the correct attitude toward dating things in this museum. Here is what we are going to do today. We are going to walk, in order, through about 2,500 years of pictures, coins, frescoes, and mosaics, and we are going to chase a single question down every corridor it runs into. Why do so many gods glow? And is it all one glow? Because you've noticed it, everyone notices it. The Buddha glows. Christ glows. Apollo glows. Persian kings glow. Figures on cave walls at Dunhuang glow, and figures on gold-ground panels in Florence glow, and if you squint at certain coins from Afghanistan, the emperors on them are glowing too. It looks, from a distance, like the whole ancient world got the same memo. And whenever human beings in far-flung places appear to get the same memo, one of two things has happened. Either the memo traveled, or everyone wrote it independently, because some ideas are simply lying around waiting to be picked up. Scholars call these options diffusion and independent invention, and the fight between them is the engine of this entire museum. Which brings me to my favorite visitor. There's one in every group, I can already see them adjusting their glasses, the one who, every time I trace a motif from one empire to the next, will raise a hand and ask, couldn't they have just come up with it on their own? It's the sun. Everybody has the sun. I want you to know, before we begin, that this person is not a nuisance. This person is doing serious scholarship, for free, and by the end of our tour they will be partially vindicated. One housekeeping note, and it's the most important thing I will say all day. In this museum, every claim wears a little brass tag. Some tags say verified, checked against the sources, survived people actively trying to kill it. Those I will state as plain fact. Some say debunked, and oh, we keep those on display anyway, in a special case, because a debunked story is twice as instructive as a true one. And some say disputed or flagged, real observations with contested explanations. I will always tell you which tag you're looking at. A museum that doesn't label its fakes is just an expensive rumor. Coats in the cloakroom. Photography encouraged. This way, please. Chapter 1. Welcome to the gallery. We begin in the oldest wing, and I'll be honest with you, the lighting in here is terrible, and that's on purpose, because so is the evidence. Before anyone in the ancient world drew a circle behind a holy head, people were already writing about holy radiance. The Sumerians and Akkadians had a word for it, malamu, a terrifying brilliance that gods exuded the way the rest of us exude opinions. Kings could carry it too, on loan. It could be granted, it could be stripped. When Mesopotamian texts want you to know a god is present, they don't say he looked important. They say the malamu came off him like heat off a forge, and strong men fell down. Notice what I did not say. I did not say the Sumerians painted discs behind anyone's head. They didn't, so far as our collection can show. Malamu is a concept of radiance, not a picture of one, an ancestor of the idea, not of the shape. The tag on this case reads, conceptual ancestor, no documented lineage to the drawn halo. I know. It's frustrating. It stays frustrating for another 1,000 years. Egypt, next alcove. Here is Ra, and here is that magnificent solar disk sitting on his falcon head like the world's most committed hat. Surely, this is the halo's grandfather. A literal sun, attached to a literal divine head? Look at the tag, debunked, at least in the strong form. The claim that the earliest halos were Egyptian was put to our verification panel and voted down unanimously. The sun disk is worn, you see. It's regalia, a thing placed on the head, like a crown. The halo, when it finally arrives, is not worn. It is emitted. It surrounds. It comes from inside the person and hangs behind them like the visible exhaust of divinity. An Egyptian god carries the sun, a haloed saint leaks it. The difference sounds small and is everything. But couldn't, yes, friend, right on schedule, couldn't every culture just independently think important person, bright light? Fire is bright. The sun is bright. Faces of people we love seem to shine. It's not exactly a patentable insight. And you're right. That's precisely why this room exists. The idea of radiance around the sacred almost certainly is one of those thoughts lying around for anyone to pick up. Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India all seem to have picked up some version of it with no memo required. If our question today were, did ancient peoples independently associate divinity with light, the tour would be over and the gift shop would be doing brisk business. But that is not our question. Our question is about the shape, the specific, drawable, copyable convention of a disk or ring of light behind the head. Shapes are different from ideas. Ideas float, shapes travel in luggage. A shape has to be carved by someone who saw it somewhere, on a coin that got carried in a sthlbag, copied by a workshop, taught to an apprentice. Shapes leave receipts. And the receipts, the first real, datable, hold them in your hand receipts, come from a part of the world most museum tours skip entirely, the place where Greece, Persia, and India crashed into each other and nobody ever fully cleaned up. But we're not going there yet. First, we need to talk about fire. Persian fire. Through this archway. Careful, it's warm. Chapter 2, The Fire That Follows Kings. This gallery smells faintly of smoke, and if the curators could make it smell more of smoke, they would. Persia, Iran, in the broad old sense that runs from Mesopotamia's edge to the mountains past Afghanistan, contributed to our story a single word, and the word is worth the whole wing, Kvarana. You'll also see it as Exvarina, Farah, or Far. Transliteration is the revenge scholars take on the living. In the Zoroastrian scriptures, the Avesta, Kvarana is the divine glory of kings and heroes, and here is the crucial part, tag reading verified, it is not a metaphor. It is a force, a magical power of explicitly luminous and fiery nature. In the hymn called Yasht 10, 127, the Kvarana of legitimate rulers travels ahead of the god Mithra's chariot in the form of blazing fire. When Zoroaster himself is born, tradition says his glory came down from heaven and showed itself in the form of fire at the moment of his birth. So, divine glory, physically real, made of fire, attached to kings, and, delightfully, detachable. Kvarana is hereditary charisma, but it can be lost. Misbehave gravely enough and the glory departs, at which point you are, constitutionally speaking, kindling. There are worse theories of government. Now watch me do something a less scrupulous dissent would never do. Having built up this gorgeous concept, fiery, luminous, royal, divine, I am not going to tell you, and that, of course, is where the halo comes from. Walk with me to this cabinet instead, because the tags in it are where the real scholarship lives. First tag, verified and important, Kvarana is closely tied to fire and light, but the specialists caution that it is not simply equivalent to light. Middle Persian had a perfectly good word for light, roshni, and the texts do not use the two interchangeably. Kvarana is more like fortune, glory, and radiance braided together, translating it as light flattens it. Second tag, and this one surprises everybody, the identification of Kvarana with the halo is itself disputed. When art historians go looking for what Kvarana actually looked like in Iranian art, the two motifs with the best textual support are not the head disc at all. They are flames rising from the body, especially the wonderful flaming shoulders you'll see on Kushan coins in the next gallery, and a bird of prey. An eagle or falcon, glory with talons. One scholar, Tonabe, wrote a paper on the Sasanian disc Nimbus whose title I keep taped inside my locker, Farewell to its Kvarana theory. Academics do not often write breakup letters, treasure them when they do. Third tag, disputed between our own review panels, and I show you this one in the spirit of full disclosure. On the great rock relief at Tarke Bostan there is a hunting scene, and one reading of it holds that the king acquires a radiant nimbus over the course of the hunt, glory earned in real time, a halo you win like a trophy. It's an irresistible story. One panel of our verifiers confirmed it, a second, harsher panel refuted it. So it hangs here with both votes displayed. A museum that only shows you its unanimous verdicts is editing the minutes. What does that leave us with, solidly? This: by the time Alexander's successors and then the Parthians and Sasanians ruled these lands, there existed in Iran a fully developed doctrine of royal glory as physical radiance, fire that descends from heaven, marks the legitimate king, and abandons the unworthy. Whether or not the disc behind the head is Kvarana, every artist in Western Asia was working in a world where that idea was in the air, the way damp is in the air of Venice. And Gloria's light was not staying politely inside Persia's borders. When Greek dynasts started ruling Persian lands, the Iranian idea of hereditary royal charisma began merging, this is verified, with Greek notions of a king's divine fortune, touche basileos, the Romans' fortuna regia. Plutarch, telling the story of Darius III, speaks of the phos, the light, of the monarch. Ideas were already interbreeding at the top of the world. The Greeks, meanwhile, had their own incandescent contribution, and it drove into the sky every morning on a 4-horse chariot. Mind the step. The next room is very bright. Chapter 3, Sun Gods and Their Crowns. Squint. Everyone squints in this gallery, it's the correct response to Aelios. Greek artists, from around the 5th century BCE, developed a way of showing their sun god that you will recognize instantly, rays. Spikes of light standing out from the head, the way a child draws the sun, because some solutions are simply optimal and children find them first. This is the radiate crown, and Greek radiate imagery is attested from roughly 450 BCE, which, our verifiers grumpily note, is earlier than several popular articles claim, so hang a small corrected tag there. Rome inherited the convention and then did the most Roman thing imaginable with it, put it on the emperor. Deified rulers and then living ones appear on coinage wearing the sun's own rays. The message is unsubtle, which was the point, coins are billboards you can spend. By the 3rd century CE the empire had an official solar cult, Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and radiate imperial portraits by the mintload. So here we have, blazing away in the Mediterranean, the second great ingredient, the sun's rays as a portable badge of divinity, attachable to human heads by political arrangement. And in the previous room we had Persia's ingredient, divine glory as fire that descends on legitimate kings. Two empires, rubbing against each other for centuries along a border neither could hold, each holding one half of what will become the halo. Now, the debunked case. This gallery has the museum's finest collection of confident nonsense, and I show it with real affection, because every item in it was published somewhere respectable. Item 1. The halo first appeared in Hellenistic Greece and Rome, derived from Persian Kvarana, imported with the cult of Mithras. A tidy westward arrow. Our panel killed it, 3 votes to none, the derivation simply can't be documented. Item 2, my favorite. The most widely accepted theory is that the halo comes from the cult of Mithras, the Indo-Iranian god of light. This one appears in print with the phrase most widely accepted doing an enormous amount of unpaid labor. Our check found no source outside the claim itself calling Mithras' origin the consensus, because there is no consensus. The candidates still standing in the literature include Greek solar imagery, Iranian glory, Mesopotamian Malamu as deep background, and the Indian workshops will meet in the next room, with every specialist hedging in a different direction. The honest tag reads, origin contested, no single theory holds the floor. So the spiky crown became the round halo, asks our friend, you see, I told you they were doing serious work, the rays just fused into a disc. Careful. That's exactly the intuition that got item 1 into the debunked case. The rayed crown and the smooth disc coexist for centuries, one does not obviously melt into the other, and our second verification panel refuted the neat Aelios Ray's imperial crown Christian disc lineage as a derivation claim even while every individual artifact in it is real. The rays existed. The discs existed. The arrow between them is where the evidence gets thin, and where the receipts run out in the Mediterranean, they pick up, gloriously, somewhere else. Because while Rome was minting sun kings, out on the eastern edge of the old Greek world, in Bactria, in Gandhara, in the mountain kingdoms Alexander left behind like unattended luggage, somebody put a full, round, unmistakable nimbus behind a head on a coin. And the head it glowed behind wasn't an emperor's. Not at first, anyway. Come see the mint. Chapter 4, The Crossroads Mint. If this museum had a heart, it would be this room, and the room is full of small change. Geography first, since the labels here assume it. When Alexander's empire shattered, Greek dynasts kept ruling Bactria, northern Afghanistan, roughly, for centuries, minting Greek coins with Greek gods for populations that were Persian, Indian, and everything in between. South of them, Gandhara, the region around the Khyber, where India begins. In the 1st century CE, the whole crossroads was swept up by the Kushans, Central Asian newcomers who built an empire from the Aral Sea to the Ganges and, crucially for us, had no artistic tradition of their own to defend. They hired everybody. Their art is Greek drapery on Indian bodies with Iranian fire coming off the shoulders. That triple fusion is verified as the deliberate house style of Gandharan workshops, not my flourish. Now, the receipts I promised you in the first room. Receipt 1, circa 180 BCE, a coin of the Greco-Bactrian king Demetrius. On it, Heracles, and behind Heracles' head, a radiating nimbus. A drawn, round, deliberate glow, on Greek-style coinage, in the Irano-Greek borderlands, before anyone in Rome or Judea would have known what to make of it. Tag, verified, twice, by both panels. Receipt 2, around 60 CE, possibly earlier, the Bimmeran casket, a little gold reliquary from Gandhara you can visit in the British Museum. On it stands the Buddha, one of the earliest Buddha figures anywhere, and behind his head, a plain round nimbus. Tag, verified, one dissenting vote on the exact date, dutifully recorded. Scholars put it anywhere from the reign of Augustus to a century later. Receipt 3, circa 127 to 150 CE, gold coins of the Kushan Emperor Kanishk I with, this is verified as the phrase indisputable evidence in the scholarly literature, an image of the Buddha, haloed, on the reverse. And on the obverses of the Kushan series generally, kings and gods with flaming shoulders, Iranian glory fire rising off them like the exhaust I mentioned earlier, sometimes with the full head nimbus besides. The great study of this material, Rosenfield's Dynastic Arts of the Kushans, treats halos and flaming shoulders and kvareno as sections of a single chapter. The scholarship itself files them as one complex, together with older, native Indian solar imagery that predates the Kushans entirely. India was not a blank page receiving a Greek stamp, it had sun gods of its own waiting to shake hands. And then there is the exhibit I'd rescue in a fire. Not an object, a word. As Buddhism traveled through the Eastern Iranian world, the Iranian glory word itself, Farah, Kvaranara's local descendant, was absorbed into Buddhist Sogdian and Khotanese, where it came to mean the position of a Buddha. It then passed into Tocharian with that meaning. Sit with that. The Persian word for the fiery glory of kings became, in the mouths of Silk Road Buddhists, the word for Buddhahood itself. Ideas leave fingerprints, but words leave forwarding addresses. Tag, verified, unanimous. From this crossroads the shape goes east with the receipts to prove it. The oasis art of Khotan, Miron, Kucha, Torfan, and Dunhuang, from the 4th century CE onward, takes its prototypes from Gandhara and Bactria, verified. The colossal 6th century Buddhas of Bamiyan wore solar discs and Iranian glory ribbons, verified. The Nimbus walks into China wearing borrowed Persian jewelry. Centuries later, in one of history's neater ironies, the Buddhist Nimbus travels back west into Seljuk Iran as a purely decorative motif, its meaning completely evaporated, the glory of kings returning home as wallpaper, verified. Before you get comfortable, the debunked case, because this room has one too. The Buddhist halo appears in India in the late 3rd century CE, brought east by Greek invaders, published by a very famous encyclopedia, and wrong twice, off by 1 to 2 centuries against the casket and the coins you just saw, and dressed in a Greek invaders' diffusion story scholars retired generations ago. Also here, the Kushans were perhaps the first to give themselves halos, and Central Asia is the origin from which it spread both ways, seductive, unprovable, voted down. So, says our friend in the glasses, arms folded but gentler now, no single origin at all? Not Greece, not Persia, not here? Here is the honest summary, and it's the thesis of the whole museum, so I'll say it slowly. Every tidy single origin story we put to verification died. What survived is better, a connected world. Greek sunrays, Iranian glorifier, and Indian solar gods all pooled in one region that minted, carved, and exported relentlessly, and the specific, copyable shape of the head nimbus demonstrably radiates outward from that pool, east along the Silk Road on documented prototypes, and west into the Mediterranean's vocabulary of power. You were right that anyone can think divinity is bright. The evidence says almost nobody independently drew the same circle. The idea is universal. The badge took the trade routes. Which leaves one great adopter unaccounted for. A small persecuted sect from the Roman Levant that spent its first 3 centuries painting its heroes with no glow whatsoever, and then changed its mind. The Christian wing is through here, past the 4th century line. You'll know it when you see it. Everything suddenly gets gold. Chapter 5. The Empire changes its badge. Stand here a moment, at the threshold, and look back the way we came. Coins, fire, sun chariots, flaming shoulders. Now look forward, gold mosaic as far as the eye can see. This is the wing everyone comes for, and the first thing I must tell you about it is how late it is. For roughly 300 years, Christian art had no halos. None. Walk the catacombs of Rome, painted ceilings, good shepherds, Jonahs, banquets, and you will not find a nimbus on anyone, Christ included. The absence is verified, the reason wears a flagged tag, because here we must be careful. The tempting story says early Christians deliberately shunned the halo as a pagan badge, the mark of Aelios and the deified emperors, everything the martyrs died refusing. Plausible. But our checkers found the deliberate boycott stated as policy nowhere in the sources. What's documented is simply the absence, then the adoption. History gives us the fact, the motive is furniture we brought ourselves. The adoption comes in the 4th century, after Constantine, when the church went from hunted to imperial practically between Mosaic commissions. And it arrives, tellingly, via the emperor's own iconography, verified the plain circular nimbus that late Roman art gave rulers and personifications. Around the 350s, on the mosaics of Santa Costanza and the sarcophagus of Junius Bassus, Christ wears it. For a while he's the only one who does, him and, charmingly, the Lamb of God, making Christianity's first haloed figures a king and a sheep. The apostles, the Virgin, the saints, they queue up for theirs over the following centuries. Eventually the ranks are formalized, the cruciform nimbus for Christ, the plain circle for saints. And note what the Christians did not take, the spiky radiate crown, Aelios's actual signature, stays untouched. They took the disc. On coinage the timeline is even more deliciously cautious, verified. Christ does not appear on a Roman coin until Justinian Tusgold of 692, and doesn't get his cross halo on coins until Basil I in 867. Empires change their badges slowly where the money is concerned. So the plain historical sequence, tags checked, pagan badge of solar imperial glory, adopted by the church 3 centuries after Jesus, via the emperor's portrait conventions. Put that baldly, it sounds almost scandalous, as if the faith simply pocketed the enemy's insignia. And now I'll show you what makes this wing profound instead of embarrassing. The theology came after, and it was magnificent. Because Christianity did not, in fact, lack a theology of divine light, it had inherited one older than Rome. The Hebrew scriptures are full of kavod, the glory of the Lord, and kavod is not a compliment, it is a presence, the thing that fills the tabernacle so densely Moses cannot enter, that settles on Sinai in fire and cloud, that leaves Moses' own face shining so fiercely he wears a veil. Greek-speaking Jews and Christians rendered it doxa. The rabbis spoke of the Shekinah, the dwelling presence. When Christian thinkers needed to explain the borrowed disc, this was the vault they opened. God is light, the glory shone around the shepherds, Christ is the radiance of the Father. The halo was baptized, if you'll forgive me, retroactively. Watch the vocabulary become art. The head nimbus was the small denomination, for full theophanies, transfiguration, ascension, Christ in majesty. Byzantine art minted the mandorla, the almond or circle of light surrounding the entire body. Scholars read the mandorla as kavod made visible, verified not this person is holy but you are looking at the glory of God, avert accordingly. By the 6th century it's institutional, the Sinai Transfiguration mosaic, rays hammering off Christ inside the oval, verified. And the light acquired its own doctrine, though notice the dates. When 14th century monks claimed to see God's own uncreated light in prayer, the light of Mount Tabor, and Gregory Palamas built the theology to defend them, official Orthodox doctrine from 1347, verified. The halo had already been on the walls for 1,000 years. Borrowed first, explained later, explained so well the seams nearly vanished. Nearly. Because there's one seam in this wing the curators have lit deliberately. A pattern noted in one of the standard reference works on Christian iconography, Schiller's, observes that in the very early art, before about 500, Christ often lacks the halo in scenes set before his baptism in the Jordan, and wears it after, as if the artists themselves were debating the exact moment the glow arrived. The tag reads real pattern, disputed cause. A rival explanation says the halo simply tracked exalted, enthroned imagery, so handle it gently. But it tells you how seriously the badge was taken. Within a century of adopting it, the church was already arguing, in paint, about when it switched on. What the earliest texts say happened at that river is a detective story all its own, and, I'm told, another museum's tour. One wing left. It's the saddest one, and my favorite. It's about what happened when painters learned to tell the truth about space, and the glow, after 2,000 years, got in the way. Chapter 6, Death by Perspective. Final Gallery. Take your time in here, everything in it is beautiful, and most of it is a long goodbye. Begin with the craft, because the halo's Italian golden age was, before anything else, a manufacturing triumph. On a 13th century panel, that disc behind the Madonna's head is not paint. The panel was coated in gesso, layer upon sanded layer, sized with red bowl clay, then gilded with leaf and burnished, sometimes in circular strokes, so the gold throws back candlelight like a polished shield, and finally tooled, punched, incised, patterned, so the halo catches candlelight from every angle in a dark church. On Cimabue's Great Maresca in the Uffizi, the punchwork in the margins is so datable that specialists can read it like a hallmark, the 1290s, verified. These objects weren't pictures of light. In a candlelit nave, they were light. And then somebody had to go and invent truth. You know the story's headline, Florence, early 15th century, linear perspective, the discovery that a painting could be a window, with depth you could measure. What the headline omits is the collateral damage, and our exhibit is the crime's most eminent victim. A flat gold disc pasted on the picture surface is perfectly at home in a Byzantine heaven, which floats. Put it behind a head in a room, a head that turns, in space you could walk into, and suddenly you must answer questions no theologian ever posed. Is the disc attached to her head? Does it turn when she turns? What does it look like from behind? The reference works state it plainly. With the growth of realism, the halo became a problem for artists. Consensus framing, our checkers note, with a raised eyebrow, that both encyclopedias assert it and neither cites anyone. Some truths apparently arrive uncited. Watch the painters negotiate, case by case. Giotto and Duccio, right at the threshold, around 1305 to 1311, still loyal to the gold disc, but already fudging, halos discreetly shrunk or shuffled where a crowd would turn the heavenly host into a stack of dinner plates. Medium confidence, our tag says. Look closely at the arena chapel crowds and judge for yourself. Masaccio, the tribute money, circa 1424, the first great technical fix, he foreshortens the halos. They float above the apostles' heads as ellipses, obeying perspective like good Florentine citizens, verified as the standard reading. It is ingenious and slightly ridiculous, gold serving trays hovering at each correct angle, and everyone at the time seems to have felt both things. Fra Angelico, mid-century, a friar caught between heavens. In a single painting of 1450 he renders Mary's halo in perspective while Joseph stays flat against the picture plane, flagged, tertiary sourced, and delicious. One artist, one panel, two incompatible physics of holiness. Leonardo, the quiet executioner. His Last Supper, 1495–98, the most famous sacred image of its age, has no halos at all. None. Christ included, verified. And this omission killed a working convention, because for generations the table had been painted with every disciple haloed except Judas, the halo as spoiler. Leonardo replaced the gold with geometry, Christ framed by the window's light, serenity doing the work insignia used to do. His two Virgin of the Rocks make a perfect controlled experiment, verified. The Louvre version, most fully his, no halos. The London version has thin gold ones, and scholarship's polite verdict is that it is not certain they weren't added later by another hand. Even where a Leonardo halo exists, it's a suspect. Michelangelo, here the museum practices what it preaches. Walk the Sistine ceiling in your mind, prophets, sibyls, the creation of Adam. Do you remember a single halo? Our researchers found the observation stated as documented fact nowhere reachable. The Vatican's own materials are silent, so the tag reads, "Go look." The museum merely hands you the ladder. Titian, Assumption of the Virgin, Venice, 1516–18, the transformation completed rather than the deletion. No disc, instead the entire upper zone of the picture ignites in golden heavenly light, angels dissolving into irradiated cloud, verified. Stand before it and you realize what happened. The halo didn't vanish. It melted, from an object back into what it had claimed to represent all along. Radiance, unbadged. Caravaggio, around 1600, gets the last Italian word, as he tended to. In his Death of the Virgin, Mary is a swollen, barefooted corpse in a red dress. Contemporaries were scandalized, and her sole claim to sanctity is a halo reduced to a thread, one thin ellipse of light, the minimum legally required glow, verified. And note, the critics howled about the corpse, not the thread. By 1606 nobody was defending the disc. His Madonna di Loreto, same device. A barefoot virgin in a doorway, only a slim halo separating her from the pilgrims. You will read that the Counter-Reformation mandated halos through writers like Malanus and Borromeo. Our checkers chased that claim to its footnote and found no footnote. Tag, unsourced. Do not repeat at dinner parties, which I recognize is exactly how one guarantees a thing gets repeated at dinner parties. And that is very nearly the end of the Western line. The halo lingers on as convention and revival, but as costume, self-conscious, historical. Realism had made the old badge unwearable. You cannot paint the measurable truth of space and also a gold plate bolted to the sky. But before you head to the gift shop, one last case, by the exit, and it changes the ending's key from minor to something older than major and minor. The Orthodox East never blinked. Icon painters from Constantinople to Novgorod to this morning, because icons are still painted, to the old grammar, kept the flat gold ground, the frontal gaze, the unforeshortened nimbus, verified as continuity. Not because the East failed to discover perspective, but because the icon never agreed to be a window onto this world in the first place. It is a window the other way. In that geometry, the halo was never an object in space that realism could embarrass. It was, and remains, what Malamu was on the first wall of our first room, the visible weather of the holy. So, the Tor. A fiery glory that followed Persian kings, a sun that Greeks spiked and Romans wore, a crossroads mint where all of it fused behind the Buddha's head and shipped east with a Persian word for glory in its mouth, an empire's church that pocketed the badge 3 centuries late and then built, from Kavod and Sinai and Taba, the grandest theology any borrowed emblem ever received, and a Florentine window that finally asked the disc a question it couldn't answer. Is it all one glow? You've seen the tags. It is many glows, and an astonishingly small number of circles, handed carefully from empire to empire like a coal carried in cupped hands. Thank you for walking with me. Mind the rope on your way out. It's mostly decorative, but so, as we've established, are some of the best things in here.